Today I received an email from somebody asking, how do you build an index at the back of a document? How do you create an index in Microsoft Word? So true to form, I thought I'd put together a quick video for you to show you the whole process from beginning to end. Now, as I was going through thinking what sort of document should I create to demonstrate this, I thought it would be quite fun and a little bit ironic to use the index chapter out of our training materials as the candidate for building an index. So that's what we're looking at here. Now, to build an index, it's a two-part process. Part 1 is to go through your document and mark all the entries you want to include. Part 2 is to use your marked entries and build the index. So let's go through and do a few simple examples here. Most of the index will be straightforward items. That's keywords or key phrases that people might look up at the back of a book or document to find a page number for something they're trying to find. In addition to those standard items, you can also structure things in a certain way. So you might have like a main entry and some sub-entries underneath. You can do that in an index. You can also cross-reference. And cross-referencing is used often when there's different words that mean the same thing. So if somebody's looking up music, you might redirect them to audio. Or if somebody's looking up nutrition, you might redirect them to food. Okay, because you've covered those things already in your index and you've already got page numbers for those things. So let's go through and create a simple index. I'm actually going to start with the bottom three here because they're straightforward items. So what you do is you first of all select the text that you want to mark. You then go to the References tab at the top of your screen, and there's an index group just here. Mark Entry opens up this dialog box. The shortcut key to get here is Alt-Shift-X. So anytime you want to open this box, you can use that keyboard shortcut. As you can see, in the main entry box is the text that you previously selected. And all you've got to do here is to click either Mark, which marks the page number for just the occurrence of the selected text, or you can choose Mark All, which means that every time it comes across cross-referencing anywhere in the document, it'll put the page number in there. So sometimes you end up with 5 or 6 or 10 different page numbers referencing the same thing. So I tend to use that because it's more comprehensive. So Mark All. Now the document format actually changes a little bit. So straight after the text we previously selected, you've now got this little phrase in curly brackets. They're called braces. Okay, now whenever you see a pair of these, it's using what's called a field code. Now the particular field code we're using for the index is this one here called XE, which stands for index entry. And then the thing in quotes that follows it, that's the item that's going to appear in the index once we build it. Now it looks a little bit messy because it's showing all the hidden formatting. If at any stage you want to go back to a standard format without all the messy stuff, you can go back to the Home tab and just click this little backward P character here. It's called a pilcrow, and that will turn off those hidden formattings. This box here, you might think you've got to close it every time and go back to your document to do the next one. You don't actually have to close the box. You can leave it open. But obviously only one thing can have the focus at any given time. So it's either the box or the document. You can't have both at once. So we're going to go back and choose compiling the index. So first off, I click back on the document to put the focus on it. Select the next phrase, compiling the index. Click back on the box here, and the text goes into the mark entry box. I then just mark all, like I did before, and it creates a new index entry in the document. Let's click back on the document. The next one here is concordance. So I double click on that. Click on the dialog box again. Concordance is now in the main entry, and we mark all. And again, another index entry has been created. So those are the easy ones. But these two here, where it says marking a main entry and marking a sub-entry, we're actually going to create a top-level item called marking an entry and have two sub-items called main entry and sub-entry. Here's how you do that. So I'm going to highlight main entry, go back to the box here, and main entry, just like before, appears in the main entry box. We're actually going to get rid of that and just create a top-level item that says marking an entry and a sub-item that says main entry. That's it. We then click mark all, and a new index entry has been created. For the next one, I'm going to click back on the document, double click on sub-entry, click back in the dialog box, get rid of this sub-entry from here, and again, marking an entry, and the sub-entry this time will be sub-entry. Now you'll see what this looks like in just a second, but we've got like a major heading and two sub-items underneath. So let's mark all and close. That's the marking process done. So part 2 is to create the index. So let's go to the end of the document. I'm pressing Control End to do that. Once I'm there, I'm going to press Control Enter, which is the shortcut key for a page break, and just put a heading called index. And underneath there, we're going to create the index, which will be dynamic. So as the content changes, everything will update in here. So with my cursor in position, I choose References again, if I'm not there already, and this time choose Insert Index. Now, if you've done tables of contents before, this should look quite familiar to you. It's very similar in its layout. So down the bottom where it says Formats from Template, that's to do with the look of the index. So you've got a few choices in here, and you can choose whatever you like, and whichever option you choose, the look will be different. Now down here, I tend to always select right align page numbers, so that you've got your item on the left, your page number on the right. It's just a lot neater. And also for the tab leader, that's the bit that connects the item with your page number. I tend to always choose dots. Your other choices there are dashes and underscores. I think they're a little bit too heavy, but dots are good. On the right, it's currently indented. That's the look that we see here. You can also choose run in, which is a slightly different look. And also you can increase the columns from 1 to 2 or 3 or 4, however many columns you want. 1 just means it goes across the full page width. 2 would obviously do half the page, 2 columns of those. 3 would do a third of the page and 3 of those, and so on. Quite often your index is quite short entries, so you might find that multiple columns is a more efficient way of displaying that information. Once you've chosen your options, you click OK, and the index is now built. Okay, so it's a 2-column index. You'll notice the letters here. So everything starting with C, everything starting with M. We've got a very small selection here. In reality, you tend to use the indexes on big documents where there's lots of stuff. And you tend to spend quite a lot of time going through and marking lots of stuff, and therefore your index is quite big. And the alphabetical ordering is actually pretty useful. If we look at what we have here, you've got the 3 standard entries we did first, and all of those actually have multiple page numbers because they appear multiple times. The sub-entry we created, here's your main heading, and here's your 2 subheadings. And again, you've got multiple page numbers for each of those. Now let's do a quick example of a cross-reference. A cross-reference is where you have multiple words or phrases that are pretty much the same thing. So you redirect the reader to the same place. So let's just come up here a little bit. We're going to use field code here. I'm going to redirect the reader to the XE field code, which also needs marking. So first up, let's choose field code, redisplay the mark entry box, and down in cross-reference, I'm going to say C XE field code and mark. So here's the new field code in the document. Again, it's got XE and then the field code, which is the item that's going to appear in the index. And then after the \T, you've got the bit that it's cross-referencing. So that's the way that's laid out. Now what we also need in the index, of course, is the XE field code page numbers. Now normally you would choose this whole phrase here and then mark it. But because we've got an existing field code that directly follows that phrase, it wouldn't actually register a new one. So what I'm going to do instead is just to click or double click XE, come back to my mark index entry box, and then I can fully populate it here. Okay, so XE field code, and then mark all. When we do that, you'll see the field code has been inserted correctly there, which is what we need. Let me close the box. Now you go to the end of the document with Control End, and let's update this index. So I'm going to right click and update field. And first of all, we'll see the cross-reference here. So field code is saying see the XE field code. And because we also marked XE field code, that has the relevant page numbers. So they're the different ways you can use the index. You can either just mark entries straight, you can create sub-entries for them to organize them, you can also cross-reference stuff that's different ways of referencing the same thing. Now, if you didn't take it any further, that's how most people use indexing. But you can actually make your life a little bit easier if you plan ahead by using what's called a concordance file. Now, a concordance file is a separate document that has a 2-column table. In the left column of the table, you have the entry that's going to get marked. On the right-hand side of the table, you have how it's going to look in the index. And you can actually specify sub-items there as well, although you cannot do cross-referencing using a concordance. Before I show you the concordance file, I'm going to do a bit of a cleanup here. So let's select all of this stuff here and delete. And we also need to delete the existing field codes because we're going to recreate them from the concordance file. Now, it can be quite a long process to go through individually and find all these XE entries and delete them. There could be hundreds or thousands sometimes. So here's a little shortcut for you. We need to open up the Replace dialog box, which is part of the Find and Replace toolset. So you can either go to the Home tab, and you'll find Find and Replace on the right-hand side then. You can also press Control H. So either way, displays this box here. Now, where it says Find What, you use this little notation. It's a circumflex, which is the little sort of Chinaman's hat above the 6 key, so Shift and 6, followed by D, which represents delete, and then space XE. Now what that's going to do is to search out all those XE index entries. We're going to replace with nothing at all. So leave this bed empty, and then click Replace All. You'll see it's made 21 replacements, and if we click OK and close the dialog, when we go back to the document, there are no index entries in the document anymore. So here's an example of a concordance file. And there's a few things happening here, and there's a few other reasons why you might want to use one. First of all, it takes care of all word forms and any differences in case that you might have. So for example, concordance might appear with a capital C or a lowercase c. If you have them both as concordance entries here, you can actually say, look, I want both of those to appear in the index under concordance with a capital C. What I've also got here, cross-reference, again is using that same thing. It might be cross-reference with a space between the words, with a hyphen between the words. It could be upper or lowercase. So there's lots of combinations it could be. It could be reference, it could be referencing. Now all of those, what we're saying over here is I want to create a top-level item called index entry. It's then got a colon, followed by the sub-entry I want to see in the index. So cross-reference is going to be the sub-entry in this case. Down on the bottom 3, we've got the similar sort of thing. So we've got mark an entry, all lowercase, marking an entry, all lowercase, and mark index entry with the first letters capitalized. Now all of those, if anybody searches for those or anywhere they appear in the document, we want to mark those and make them appear in the index as one thing. And that is again a top level item called index entry with a sub entry called mark. Let's just use this and we'll see what it looks like in the final document. So I'm just going to close this and return back to our index here. Now this is the document we was on before. We cleared all the existing index entries. We're going to rebuild it using the concordance file. It goes like this. Position your cursor, click references at the top, and insert index. So we're not going to mark manually this time. We're going to insert the index here, and it opens up this box. Down the bottom is an option called auto mark. And that will ask you then for a file. And we're going to choose concordance example. Now nothing happens at this point. We're still exactly where we were, but it now knows what it's got to use to build the index. It's done exactly the same job as you going through the document, marking all those entries separately. All we've got to do is to rebuild the index. So insert index again. We set our options how we want them, and we click OK. So this index has now been built, but based on a concordance. So you've got the single entry called concordance with a capital C there, with all its relevant page numbers. Over here, you've got the top level item with 2 sub items. And again, all the different variations, like cross-reference, cross-referencing, different case and so on, they've all been picked up where it's been appropriate, and the page numbers appear in one place. So that's my run through of how to build an index, and I hope that's been useful to you. So there's 2 ways you can go, just to recap quickly. The first way is to go through your document and mark all your entries. Not forgetting, you can also include sub-entries and cross-referencing. Once you've marked the entries, you build the index. The second approach is to build a concordance file that's a 2-column table, where the left-hand column has the entries you want to mark, and the right-hand column has what you want to appear in the index. With a concordance, you cannot cross-reference, but you can include sub-items if you want to. So if that's been useful for you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the comments beneath. Otherwise, I shall see you in the next video.